Jeff Colson, Junior Hockey Live here with Mike Boom. We are ready to talk a little bit of junior hockey. Hope you're all having a great evening, start of your evening. Hope you had a great day. I know in our area, Western New York, it's been thunderstorms on and off all day long. Although it's been warm, it's been nice, but not a day to go out and take a long walk. So, Mike, how you doing?
Not bad. I think we sent all those storms your way. So we've been battling through it over the last few days ourselves. Yesterday, we had, I think it was raining marbles. We had about, marble size ice balls that were falling from the sky for about 25 minutes. So that
You
was
know
fun. I haven't seen
they
that
got a
in
name
years.
for those. They have a name for those, don't you?
Yeah, hail.
Okay, just want to make sure you knew what the name was.
That's less interesting to just say it was hailing.
Yeah, but it's much more concise though. Gets to the
Not
point.
as descriptive, Jeff. Not as descriptive. You don't know what size hail.
Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, listen. It's time to talk a little junior hockey. A lot of things going on. We're gonna have on next week a couple different guests if everything works out right. But we're gonna start getting into having some people on some of the championship programs. I think we're gonna actually bring a U18 coach on. I think we're gonna bring a couple different junior leagues on and have a conversation with the champions and talk about what it takes, what they did, what was special about their year. I think that'll be a lot of fun. We're going to start that next week. We actually thought we'd do it tonight, but we had a guest pull out. Actually, reached out to a few of them, so we'll definitely be talking to, for example, the NCDC. We're going to talk to the Pal Islanders. It's pretty special. First time they've won it. Some of us predicted correctly who would win.
Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
Controversy over who else correctly picked the Pal Islanders, but we'll let it go at that. And we'll be talking to them. I've known the group management group over there for a long time. Ron Kinnear runs the program. Ron also runs the Florida Blades. Some of you might know that program from the southwest side of Florida. I had to kind of turn myself around to make sure I was saying the right thing there. But they have a good program, so good to see Pal did well. So we'll touch base with all the teams. We're going to reach out to the NA3HL, the EHL. We'll get a chance. But what we thought we'd do tonight is Mike and I were talking earlier in the day, and we thought we'd take a different league. We've done a little bit of this in the past, but jump into it with a little more detail, different leagues. And we thought we'd pick the AJHL tonight and discuss the merits of the AJHL and discuss the merits for an American. Not that, everybody that listens to this is American. We've got a worldwide audience that picks up the broadcast. And our family members include people from Canada and all over. And I know we've got Sweden, Russia. I can't even tell you all the different places. We actually had South Africa pop up a few months ago. Somebody listening or watching and listening down there too. So we've got a lot of things to talk about in, just to cover the area and cover the conversation in that area. Don't forget, at any point you want to comment, you want to throw your comments on, please do. You can go right on to whatever platform you're using and go right into the live comments. I'm looking to see, making sure I've got mine set up so I can see comments. Because if I don't, then I don't know you're talking. So, yeah, very good. We're up live, and if you decide you want to say anything, just jump on and say hello. You want to ask a question, feel free to ask a question too. Great time to also remind you, as you've got us up on one part of your screen, you can also pull up Junior Hockey Live on our YouTube page and go to the YouTube and subscribe, like and subscribe to Junior Hockey Live on the page. And you can also go ahead and jump into Junior Hockey Advisor on Facebook or YouTube as well. So with that said, let's talk AJHL. What do you want to say about it, Blooms?
Well, I think everything, anytime somebody talks about the AJ, everyone always thinks of one program, because of how dominant they've been. And then also, they got a lot of accolades from having, some NHL players come out of their program, and NHL superstar and Cal McCarr, and it's the Brooks Bandits. So anytime you ever bring up the AJ, people always want to talk about Brooks, which is great because they do a great job and they get a lot of good players, and they do a good job of developing them to move on to college. And then obviously like the pros, like we talked about, but the league itself is really strong. And, there's other programs too that we could probably highlight. I know Bonneville has been really strong over the last few years. White Court's always one of those kind of programs that are towards the top. You got the Sherwood Park Crusaders. They're always a really strong program too. And then there's others that have obviously their groupings of maybe a couple years where they make a good run at it and have some, sustained success, but then, kind of rebuild and try to take a stab at it again later. But, again, the league itself is really strong. So for the people who haven't really paid attention to it at all or notice it in any way, you do see a lot of kids that are playing in the AJ end up either maybe coming over and playing in the USHL. They come over and play the North American League. They go directly into NCAA college because, again, anyone who plays in the AJ is not giving up their college eligibility like they would if they played in the OJ or the WHL, or not the OJ, but the OHL, the WHL.
Yeah, they'd be mostly W because of being the West Coast team. But we got to be careful on that. There is one caveat to that statement. You will have players, and some teams will have 2, 3, 4 players that had already played in the W that come back to the AJ for whatever reason. Now, that doesn't mean that it affects your eligibility if you go up and play on one of those teams, but it definitely precludes them from playing in the NCAA ranks for the most part. Times are changing because now you can appeal, and now you might get a little bit. You might lose 1 year if you play for one year for 1 year. It used to be absolutes when it came to the NCAA and the appeal process, and the answer was pretty much 99% of the time no. But now it's a little different. So and with this name, image, and likeness NIL situation, it just keeps convoluting things, and the NCAA really has no option but to start being a little bit more lenient on situations with players because it's the bed they made. You could say it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but it is what it is, So you're absolutely right. Everything about that's true. Let's back up a little bit and let's talk about, let's just start with the geography of this. If you don't know where it's at, I think I can pull up the AJHL on a map. And if I don't have it, I'll get it. So I can always go right to the AJHL inside of Elite Prospects, and I'll pull that map up. So it gives you an idea what the league looks like and where teams are at. So if you don't know, there's British Columbia. That's the farthest west you can go. But right next to British Columbia is Alberta. And I'll pull this up. There it is. Look at that, first time. So there's the Providence. There's the province of Alberta, and the red dots show you where the teams are at. So if you're not Fort McMurray or Sherwood Park or Lloydminster, the rest of it's pretty much clumped pretty good together. Those jagged lines that go along the left edge of this picture here, right where my cursor is going up and down, those jagged lines are really where the Rockies are at. And on the other side of that is British Columbia. Some would say that the prettiest part of in fact, many say the prettiest part of the Canadian Rockies are right down in this area, Canmore, and there's I think it's Banff. I think there's a few other ski areas right down in that southwest corner there. I've been there to watch hockey. I've been there to see things. The area is absolutely wonderful. We have a video on this. We have an AJHL video on Junior Hockey Advisor. You can go to it and you can grab that video. Might be a little dated now because it's probably 3-4 years old, but it gives you a lot of breakdown of the areas. But the reason I brought this map up the most part is because people think of Western Canada and they think of, oh, terrible travel. But if you look at how well these are clumped together, remember, Edmonton and Calgary sit right down the middle, right in these areas right here. Edmonton is a little bit above Camrose, and where's Camrose show up here? Camrose is right here. So Edmonton's right in this area here, and you go just south of Edmonton here, you're going to run into Calgary. So they're right there. So if you look at where these teams are clumped, they're all clumped within a reasonable distance of the two major cities, and they're not really that hard to get to. I haven't made excuse me, I haven't made the trips in severe weather, but I have been there when it's been 20 below degrees, and it's pretty treacherous. But I like the area. I like the travel. It's competitive hockey, and once again, you see too, it's broken into east and west. So I don't know exactly where the cutoff is, but it's pretty much you split the province in half, and that's pretty safe. Maybe on a diagonal, I don't know, but it's not that bad of travel. It's not that bad of travel. So
thankfully they're close together because the weather out there does get pretty extreme. So that's one. Obviously in the summer it's beautiful out there. In the winter it's beautiful, but driving around in it can get a little bit dicey if you're not careful.
yeah, and it's mostly blowing snow because remember you've got the Rockies right here. And the rest of it, what's interesting about this is the area reminds me a lot of Oklahoma. It reminds me a lot of some of the states that are oil states, Texas, Oklahoma, and the north parts. It's cattle and it's oil, and that's the big things that they do there. And we've got states like that too. It's not really a Montana. It's not really a Wyoming, because those areas in the United States are pretty hilly and mountainous, and a lot of terrain. Once you're past the Rockies, this is all plains,
Right.
so it's pretty flat and uneventful. But if you like cows and you like oil, you can go there, or you can go to Odessa and play there. Odessa and the Null's got the same kind of feeling too. Probably Oklahoma's got that same vibe, but pretty cool place. Some other cool things about it is, you go to Canmore, you're playing in Canmore, you're going to have a possibility of elk or moose actually popping right up next to the rink and hanging out. My son, when he played up there, actually had a video that he was warming up with the team. They're outside. It was a fall day, and the whole soccer field next to the hockey rink was covered with these huge elk, just huge elk. And they're just all chilling, eating the soccer grass, and just waiting for the game to start. I guess I don't know what they were doing there, but you can see that. The other thing is the area's got the wild horses of the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. So if you take a little side trip, if you're up there for hockey, if you're not, it's still cool. We drove out, my wife and I, and my son. It was the day after his game. We jumped in the car. We drove up into the foothills of the Rockies and got a chance to see the wild horses up there. And it's unbelievable because these things just run around on their own, and they're in their herds, and just really, really pretty. So they're like seeing elk or deer or moose when you're down in the States somewhere. Pretty cool, really cool. Brooks is
That
the
little
team.
southern tip there. If you go down, what state are you driving into? Is that Montana or is
Yeah,
that
so that's a great question. I'll pull up a map for you so you can see that on a map, because it is a little difficult to get to, and I will gladly show you that on map form. It just takes me a second to get the map up. You can talk while I'm doing this, Mike. Tap dance. Do a dance or
did
something
you ever
for me.
make that drive or did you fly when you went?
I've made the drive several times, and I've actually flown it. As a coach, I've never driven it. As a parent, dropping off or picking up, and actually, I didn't. I didn't drop. He flew up there the first time, and then we drove his car up. Him and I drove his car up the second time. So here is the States, and if you notice here, and I'll get this centered for you. Right here is Calgary. You can see that. Edmonton's right above it.
Yep.
Right there's the two big cities. Then you come down here and you get into, there's Washington, there's Idaho, and then there's Montana. So really you're going to go to Montana, but if you're an East Coast person driving there, there's a good chance you're going to jump up into Winnipeg and then drive across through Moose Jaw and then head into Calgary through maybe Medicine Hat or something like that. We came home through we jumped into Montana, then jumped straight over into North Dakota and made a veer across that way. It's a hard drive. I mean, that's a very long drive. However, we got a lot of hockey on the West Coast now in the United States. This whole area, remember, there's Everett right there. Victoria's right there. This is BC country, British Columbia territory. But, this area here is now growing for us hockey-wise. And then California's down here. If you're a California hockey player, these two provinces are very accessible, especially by airplane. You can fly into Calgary, you can fly into Edmonton from LA on a direct flight. You can't do that from Chicago or Detroit for the most part. I mean, you might be able to a little bit, but it's we usually from the Western New York area, we're driving up to Toronto if we want to catch a direct flight out to the Western Canada. So, but it's a wonderful area. You can see where the Rockies come across right here, and climate-wise, I've been up there in the spring, summer, fall, and winter, and it's been nice in all of them. Yeah, it gets super cold, and the roads get a lot of drifts because of the flat surfaces. So, but let's talk a little bit about hockey. One of the questions that comes in, and we know who it's coming from already. Junie asked the question right off the bat: could an AJHL team beat a NOL team? Bloomer, you start off. I got my opinions, but let's hear what you have to say on that one first.
Well, I mean, if we're considering Brooks, which is in the AJ, they could beat anyone. They could beat USHL teams. They could for sure beat a NOL team. They're really good. There's probably a couple other teams in the league, like whoever the second place team is right now. I don't know if it's Bonneville or who's really in that category this year, but I'm sure they could give, for sure part of the league in the NA a run for their money. I don't know where that breaking point is, but to the answer to the question, definitely. There's definitely teams in the AJ that can beat teams in the NOL.
Absolutely. And that's the difference is the depth. The top 3 to 5 players on every AJ team in the top half, the top 3/4 of the league, are just as good as the players in the NOL. The depth of the teams are a little different. That's the biggest thing I noticed when I both scout and was watching as a parent up in the league. But there's another thing we can do. We can look at this and kind of talk a little bit about where outcome is, and what we'll do is we'll pull up a different website. We'll pull up College Hockey Inc. And I've got it right here. Let's go up to College Hockey Inc. And it looks like this when you get on. And we'll go over here into recruiting, and we'll pull up the college commitment list. Now, remember, this is where the kids are currently playing. It's not where they committed from. So many of these, it works out, especially this list is in most current. This is 4-3 where these players were announced, and it works backwards. So this top part of the list is fairly accurate, okay? But remember, we got to be careful now because they're starting to put the USPHL and the NCDC are starting to put their Division III commitments on this list, so things change a little bit. But if you take the current team button up here and you click on it right here, the big current team there. Now what that does is it breaks it down into, on the far left, where they're playing. There's all of our national development players. Then we get into the USHL. And then we'll get into the NOL players here in a second. And this is guys that are currently in the leagues that are committed. So there's our North American League commitments. You move on past that. You move into the BCHL. And then as we know, after the USHL, after the NOL, after the BCHL, the next group is right there. They do it in the amount of volume of players committed. There's our AJ list of committed players. Now, this list here is just got to make sure there's not too many of the D3 picks in here. I don't see any, but there's a fairly good list. You see, Black Falls has got a ton this year. Bonneville's got a good handful. Brooks Bandits is pretty much top to bottom. Calgary has got a couple. Now there's a couple commitments to even to North Dakota off of Calgary, and Calgary's not a strong team this year. Camrose has always got a good group. There's Canmore, Drumheller, Fort McMurray, Okotoks, Sherwood Park, Spruce Grove. I know I'm just reading these off, but the biggest thing I want you to notice on this is that there is a ton of players in this league that are D1 commits. This is not, you look at the next list below this, it's the SJHL, which has maybe 10, 12. Then it's Manitoba with less than 10. The OJHL, and I'm not sure why the OJ is set up because their volume is much better than the two above them. But the reason I'm looking at this is, where is that NCDC? There it is. The NCDC, as far as volume, and I know why this is because remember what I said about new versus old? And also this NCDC list is not D1. That's the biggest difference. Is this NCDC list has got Nichols, Wilkes, Geneseo, Babson. So 3 out of the 4 schools listed there are D3, 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 D3. These aren't D1 schools. If you go back and look at this list, Holy Cross is D1. Penn State D1. I might miss something here.
AIC.
Where was AIC at? Oh, yeah, AIC 3, St. Lawrence 4, Bentley 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's usually in this league there's 10 or 12. Why they just started doing this, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's harder to sort now because this would show up as 10 commits, and it would make the list a lot easier. And it doesn't look like. What does it look like? It looks like when you look at the NCDC that they're just chucking a lot of players into Division I hockey. That's not the case. That's why you got to really read this list here. But the point being, compare the AJ to the NC, compare it to the North American Hockey League. They blow the NCDC doors off with D1 commitments. This is the AJ right here, but they're not quite at the same level as the NAL. And the NAL, getting back up to the top here where the NAL's at, right here, this is all the NAL list. Still a deeper, thicker list of players. More teams, we know that. There's more teams, but the volume is still good across the board in the NAL too. So does that make sense?
And you made a good point too, just as far as the depth in the AJ and just the disparity among a roster where you're going to have, some literally NHL draft picks at the top part of the roster. And then when you get down to the, 17th, 18th, 23rd player on that team, there's a pretty big disparity. And part of that is if you're, taking all the kids that are in that Alberta province, a lot of those players, they're going into the WHL. That's kind of where they're moving. The kids that don't either can't because of ability or are choosing not to because they're hoping to go the American NCAA college route. And that's where you see some of those NHL level draft picks that in their mind, they're thinking, I'll go and play for, Minnesota or North Dakota for a year. And hopefully I'm a first, second, third, fourth round draft pick. And then, I play a year or two NCAA and then I make my move to the NHL. So the Cal McCarrs and, those types of players who Cal went to UMass, and I think he played for 2 years. I don't think he left after his first year, but either way, like he chose that route. It wasn't because he couldn't play in the WHL or anything else. That was his path.
It absolutely was his path. And one of the things I'll show you, getting back to elite prospects, is let's look just at the amount of Americans in the league. If we look at the breakdown here, there's not that many. And this is restricted. So you see Ukraine and Russia represented with 2 players. That's because they're probably dual citizens. They don't let Europeans play, but the U.S. has only got 44 players, and that's about average for this league. Is about 44, 50 players from the U.S. So it's not a big place for U.S. players to go. But if we look at go up here and show you the actual roster in the league. Um, here's the breakdown of players that are leading the league right now, and this is from the top and moving that down. You only see one American in the top 10, and we'll flag him in a second. Top 25, there's only 2 Americans. Now you're down to the top 40, top 50. You start seeing a couple other Americans pop up. Americans aren't dominating up there. Some years you see 2, 3, 4 Americans at the top 10. This year it's just not the case, and I think it's still suffering a little bit from the pandemic. So many Americans chose not to go up and play in the Canadian leagues because they either couldn't get across the border safely. Safely is not the right word. Couldn't easily get across the border. And the safety issue was a lot of parents were afraid their kid was going to get stuck up in Canada and would not be able to get back down to the States if something got worse with the pandemic. Since that pandemic, we've seen a little bit of a change in this league as far as, the breakdown, the dynamics of where the players are coming from. Let's jump up and look at a couple of these players, though. If we look
on
at
the first guy, I
what's
bet
that?
he's. I said, click on the number 1 scorer. I bet he's an NHL radar draft guy.
I have not looked at Aiden Fink. So you're absolutely right. He's they got him as eligible for the draft. 78, ranked 78 across the board. Central Scouting's got him at 66 for North American skaters. So, top player in the league. Got a 100-point guy for Brooks. And, going to University of Wisconsin, not in a bad spot at all. This is a big difference in this league and other leagues. This league will put players into the Michigans, the Wisconsins, the North Dakotas. The only knock on the Null, volume's better, the depth is better, but the amount of players that go Big Ten or to the top 5, top 8 schools are limited in the Null. And why? Because we're still playing in that tier structure. There's a lot more autonomy for this league because the BCHL is not there anymore. So if you want to stay and keep your eligibility and you want to play in Canada, this league here is a great league, and you don't lose that ability to be one of the top guys. Our top guys in the States are going to be USHL picks first. So although we get a lot of D1 players in our league, we don't get as much of the volume going to the big stud schools. So that's a good pick, Mike. I'm glad you brought that one up. Let's take a look at the first American on the list. I don't know Jason. He's going to New Hampshire. He's a forward, 6 foot tall from New Jersey. And let's see how he got there. So he's up in the AJ, been there for 2 years. And there you go. He was a Avon kid. He was a prep kid. Where did he first start out at? He went from prep to the BCHL. Then he went to Black Falls from the BCHL, and he's been up there for 2 years. Now, if we look at his University of New Hampshire draft period and see when he was drafted, and that usually shows up down here. So maybe I was wrong on this one, unless that was his second school. Usually, if you go from Avon to the BCHL, you're going with your draft in hand already.
Your commitment, your scholarship.
Your commitment. I'm sorry. Your commitment in hand. So either he didn't have the commitment, or he was committed to another school, and then just recently, November of this last year, he committed to the University of New Hampshire. So, but he's been on the radar for a while. He's drafted back in the USHL Futures draft in 2018. So it's not like he hasn't already been on the elite stage. That's a normal, a little abnormal, because a prep kid going to the BCHL, the move usually isn't to move over to the AJ. So interesting.
Well,
but
one thing, if you scrolled down a little bit with just the draft, the teams that had drafted him, typically the North American League teams, because they do such a good job of, promoting kids into D1, the fact that he got drafted into the NA 2 straight years probably means that those teams are saying, this is a really good player in this league. He's still yet to commit D1. If he comes and plays for us in our league, we can help him get that commitment. And he just chose to stay and go the AJ route. But in order for 2 different programs to take him in 2 consecutive years, they were probably thinking, hey, let's bring this kid in. He's really good, and we can help get him committed.
Very well could be. Very well. Let's take a look at Cooper here. Plays up for Whitecourt. And 6'2", 20-year-old, 02. Let's see how he got there. So here's a kid that takes a little bit of a different path. And where did he grow up at? Oh, so he's a California kid. This is interesting because he, although from California, played in the Sioux. And there must have been some kind of connection there because he was there from U14 all the way up until playing for the Nojo team. So it most likely there's family connections there somehow or another. And then he went right to Whitecourt from the Nojo. That's a normal move for a Canadian player, but for an American player, this is a little odd. I would imagine that, even though it says California here, there's a good chance he's got family in the area. At least that would be my guess. What would you say, Mike?
Yeah, that's a strange one, but I would assume that they either moved, or he's got family there that he went out and stayed just because the hockey's better.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you go back and click on him again, I'm just curious to see if he got drafted into the Null or USHL when he was younger.
So, nope, not seeing any drafts for him.
Okay.
Let's do one more player just to give you an idea. And this is a player you and I are familiar with. This is Colby Brown. Last year, he's a 5'10" forward. He's from Colorado. And his path, if you see where he moved, he went Shattuck all the way through, jumped from the Shattuck team up to Olds, played for Olds for a year and a half, and then moved into the Whitecourt program. Olds is tough. Olds used to have some glory years, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but Olds is a team that has not had a very good run as of late. So for him, and the interesting thing is, all you got to do is look at something like this. When he's with Olds in 21 games, he had 16 points. You throw him over here, and his point production, goes up. So you take half that number right there. He's a 20-point guy, playing in a much more refined role. In other words, when he's on Olds, he's probably the number one player. We know the kid. You and I know. We don't know him personally. We've talked to him. We've watched him play a lot. But he's had his run at Olds, lots of ice time. Goes more into a limited role with Whitecourt, and actually his production goes up because it's a better team. So, and look at the playoff run. He had 10 points in 9 games. That's pretty good there too. So interesting where he came from. Let's look and see about no transaction history on him. Yet to commit, and the move was in November from Olds to Whitecourt. Surprised it was that early in the year. He must have asked for that because normally that would happen a little bit after January, February, as teams are starting to get ready for playoffs. So anyway, that gives you an idea a little bit about, the league itself. It gives you an idea of what the teams look like, where these players are coming from. I guess the biggest thing to say about where the players are coming from, you saw a Shattuck kid there. You saw a kid that kind of moved, it looks like, and we're making a speculation there, moved from his home, maybe back to where his father or mother grew up at in that area, played for the Sioux, came up that way. There's a good chance that even though it doesn't say he's a dual citizen kid too, because staying 5 years in the Sioux, there's got to be something that's drawing you to that area besides just hockey. That's a rough go if you've ever been up to that area. That's it's a small area. It's a small town. Even both sides of the border, it's small. So, but we gave you a couple of ideas. I guess the biggest thing is, how do you get there? how do you get there? If you're a U.S. kid and you want to be open to that market, how do you get there, Mike? What are the ways a kid would explore that to get up to that market?
Well, I'm sure reaching out to the different programs just to gauge interest, see how many import spots they have, if they've got a roster that's aging out, and then just get more familiar with what type of camps or combines that they're having that, that program can invite you out to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that this is one of the, if you're hell bent on this league, this is probably one of the few times where I'll say this uh, and really uh, stay committed to it. This is a league that most of those American players have advisors. The vast majority of Americans that are playing in that league are there because they have an advisor, and an advisor worked them into that system. First of all, there's not a lot of below the border uh, scouting, not as much as you think from the AJ. They'll go down to Phoenix for the Tier 1 Elite event there. They might go up to Blaine and watch a couple of events there because the proximity is fairly close. You can fly into Phoenix from Alberta fairly easy. But most of the kids, and this is across the board, if you're an American up in that league, most of the time you're represented. And so this might be one of the few times where the exception to the rule is having an advisor versus not having an advisor. And that's a Monday night topic, but still, to get up there, reaching out, like Mike said, reaching out, finding about if they're having any showcases, finding out if they're coming down to watch any of the spring, summer showcases, the independent things you can do, like the Boston events or one of the pre-draft skates that are not affiliated to a league. Be a good time to find out if they're doing that. But if you're playing Tier 1 Elite, I know you'll get 4 to 6 teams, maybe more, that'll come down to Phoenix, have representation there. And there's teams that like Americans more than not. I'm not sure if that showed up on the numbers at all. I can go back and look at that, but you can see some teams have an affinity for Americans and some don't, and learning that, and that's fine. Learning that, though, is important. But I had something else I was going to say. I know we got a couple people who want to make some comments, but anything else, Mike, on this?
Well, I would just say, it would be hard for any of those teams in the AJ to spend a lot of time and resources trying to scout American players because it's very similar to us in our role. We spend little time scouting, let's say, Sweden or some of the other countries because we have no idea if any of those kids would even be interested in coming to play in the United States and playing in the NOL. So any of these teams that are in the AJ, they have no idea which Americans would even be interested in coming to play in Canada and playing in that league specifically. So for them to be watching all these kids, they have no idea who would even be interested. So it's more once they know a group of kids that are interested, or they know from advisors, a couple kids that are interested, then they can focus on them and see if they'd be a good fit. So that's why if you proactively reach out to a program and you start having that dialogue, they are going to watch you because now they know, hey, this kid is interested in playing in my league. Let's see if he's good enough to where we would want to, make a move to acquire him. But they're not just going to watch all and every AAA US game that's out there because they would be wasting more time, finding hundreds and thousands of players that are not interested to all of a sudden find the 30 that are, the 15 that are. That would just be, spinning your wheels for no reason.
Yeah, that's very true. I wanted to point out one though because this is a player that maybe not everybody is familiar with. I am a big fan of Nick Blankenberg. Now I can't get his name spelled right. Nickbl. There he is. Okay, this is a Columbus Blue Jacket player, and let me pull him on the screen for you. And the reason why I think it's interesting is this was a player that you don't see much about. And when we look at him, 5'9", he's a 98 birth year. But let's look at a couple things down here. Let's move down a little bit. This is a typical Tier 1 Elite player in Detroit, but decided to play for his high school, Romeo. Okay, and yeah, he played a couple games for a USPHL team in the market. That I really wouldn't count that 3 games, but he played 3 years for Romeo. Then he went back to Tier 1 Elite, played for Victory Honda. From Victory Honda, did not get any offers. He was not a committed player, and he went up to play in the AJ and tore it up. Had a really good year. Had a good rookie year. 32 games, 28 points as a defenseman. And I'm sorry, that was his Victory Honda year. He had 42 points in 57 games as a defenseman with Okotoks, and got a commitment to Michigan. This is a kid that wasn't a draft pick. This kid did not have a resume. He was good, very good player. Don't get me wrong. Nick Blankenberg was a solid player, but he wasn't being projected to be a major Division I commitment. He wasn't being projected to the NHL at all at this period of time. Had a rough go the first couple years at Michigan. He was back and forth between a forward and a D. Settled in junior year and senior year. And one of the stories about this is I don't think he was on full scholarship until junior or senior year is when he got his full scholarship. Then look at this, boom. Now he's playing in the World Cup. He played for 7 games his senior year for the Columbus team. And he's got 36 games for Columbus in this year. That's incredible, but that's a Tier 1 elite player, a better Tier 1 elite player, but he also came from the high school ranks. That's a Detroit kid just doing his thing. Nothing jumps off the paper. You know, you can look at the numbers for Romeo and say, well, he had 67 points. So that's that's high school hockey in Michigan. If you're a good player, you're really going to stand out points-wise in the Michigan market. But you throw him back into Tier 1 Elite, he's a less than a point a game guy. That's about average. It's average for a good player. That's above average for a good defenseman. So just wanted to point him out. That's the kind of player that plays up in that league. You'll get, players like him. And if we go in and look at the year he was with Okotoks, I don't believe he was a top scorer. Let's look and see where he fits in here. So I'm looking at Okotoks from that year, or I'm looking at the league from that year, and going down the list, trying to find out where he's at. And I don't see him until I think he had 40-something points. So there he is, 60th in the league. And how many D were ahead of him? 1, 2, 3, 4 D in front of him. So this goes to show you just keep at it. And I'm just curious. You see this Sasana kid. Let's see where he's at now versus the 4th best defenseman. He's in the AHL. That's not a bad place to be either. So there's 1 year. We took one cross section, 2 Americans, one's in the AHL, one's in the NHL coming out of this league. There's very few years in the null where you can say that, where you can point out a year and take a cross cut and find that level of talent. So their top end is good. I don't think their breadth and depth is the same as what the null has, but that should help a little bit.
Well, all the depth, like we talked about, is in the WHL. So that's where a lot of the players that would fill in the rest of that roster are at. So you got the high end guys, and then it, kind of, I don't want to say I almost said the junk is down below. They're not junk, but they're not at the same ability level as the WHL guys. Another off topic, but similar track as Blankenberg. If you pull up Luke Glendenning, he's got like the most amazing path from his youth to what he ended up becoming as a player. That is just interesting. That goes along with what you said about Nick, but he like one-upped him with his path being even more crazy of how he made it.
Okay, got to pull him up so you can look at him too. Okay, played high school, went to Hotchkiss, jumped from Hotchkiss to Michigan, went from Michigan, where he was a captain 3 years. I did not know that about Glendenning, that he actually wore a letter there for 3 years in a row. His senior year after Michigan was done, went to Providence, and then bounced a couple years in the AHL, EC, then boom, you know. So now look at this. This is the interesting thing. You know, it's 2013-14 when he first started his path, you know, from high school. You know, that's 7 years out before you're making a pro living. You know, the commitment for somebody to stick with something for 7 years to see if they can make it to the NHL, that's a big commitment. You know, you leave high school to go back to prep. That means that even though he's got 4 years there, that was either a grad year or they made him repeat a year. Maybe not. Maybe he did. Maybe that's 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th. I don't know. But, you know, usually you have to do a grad year or repeat a year. And that's pretty odd. You don't normally see a kid do just 1 year at prep after he's done a full, you know, run in high school. So good for him. Yeah, good story.
But he got fast tracked. That wasn't a long time. He basically sidestepped going to juniors and went through 4 years of college and then ended up in the pro ranks.
Yeah, cool. I remember that there was something about that. I can't remember the exact story there, but there was a reason.
He was a ridiculous athlete. He was a football player and, you know, probably could have gotten a scholarship to play football. And because of that, didn't want to travel and do all that AAA type schedule and whatnot. So he played for his high school. But,
isn't that funny?
Really was a stud.
7 years from the time you graduate to the time you're in pros, and he's fast tracked. You know, yeah. And you did buy 10, but that's the biggest thing about the Glendenning story. Like you said, that's amazing is the kid never played juniors. You know, how many you can count on one hand the last 3-4 years the guys that are playing Division I, not only NHL but Division I, that stepped right out of the ranks of either prep or high school and went straight on. It just doesn't happen. So
and played as a true freshman and put up points. It's like that story. That's the one where somebody is talking about, well, my son can get there because this happened one time ever, and it's like that's the exception of the exception of the exception to the rule.
That's when you hear, well, so and so played in the NHL and he only played AA.
Yeah. Why? The East Grand Rapids high schools are like, no, you don't have to play AAA. We got guys that go into Michigan.
Look at Glendenning. He did it. I can hear that recruiting speech going on in all of Western Michigan, You don't need to play on one of those Tier 1 teams. You don't need to go to juniors. You can stay right here.
That's right.
Yeah, those guys kill me. Here's what Junie has to say. He says, so in the NHL, which divisions are harder hitting and which divisions are more skilled? Junie, we answer this every week. we literally answer this every week. So the answer to that is, the oldest division, strongest division, biggest division, hardest hitting division has been not only by perception, not only by bias from coaches, but just physically going and watching games is the South. The South is a harder division to play in. Skilled wise, I think you could say that the skill is sprinkled fairly evenly between the divisions. I don't see any one of the divisions known as being the most skilled. The reason why there's a difference is there are teams in the other divisions out of the South that their perspective on how to develop players is different. One team in particular has always been known to take super young players and players that are going to be, big time D1 commits, and the player only plays there 1 year and moves on to the USHL. And they're known for that. They're known to just, grab young talent. So why they do that and why their choices, that's a management choice, that's an ownership choice, and a coaching style choice. But you don't see that in the South. You don't see young players for the most part. And, we can do a quick look here. Mike, how are you doing on time?
I'm good.
Going. how
I
long are
got
we here?
about another 9 minutes, so we're good.
So if I go up and I just grab the null, and I can't break it down statistically for you by division, but what we can do is we can look at the overall list, height, weight wise. Just give me a second for that to pop up. So, interesting thing is if you scroll down, you're looking at the league. Um, you could actually get down into the teams. Where are the teams at? Here's the team by team comparison. So, if you look at experience, this category right here, and will it sort for me? Okay, Northeast Generals. Okay, we'll give them that. But look at the next three teams for how
You got to share it
they
for us.
got: Oklahoma, Odessa, New Mexico. Oklahoma's the best team in the league right now. New Mexico is right up there. That's pretty amazing.
You got to
Um,
share your screen so we can see.
I don't want to.
We'll just take your word for it.
Yeah, just take my word for it. So this is the league. This is the null broken down. And what I did was I sorted by experience up here. That's the column right next to the players. If you see where it says players, then you can sort by experience. Northeast Generals have a lot of talent right now. Um, excuse me, a lot of experience right now. But if you look at the Oklahoma Warriors and you look at Odessa and you look at New Mexico, that's 3 out of your top 4 teams that are the most experienced teams in the league. Now, doesn't mean that every team in the South is in the top in experience, but you're still in the top half when you get down to Lone Star, and then you look at the very bottom, Corpus Christi. They're sitting on the bottom. El Paso sitting on the bottom, ranking wise, record wise. But that should tell you a lot as far as experience. I don't know. This is new to me. If I hit this button here, average height and weight, Amarillo's up there, Shreveport's up there, Odessa's up there, Lone Star's up there. So 4 of your top 6 teams, you hit that height weight button and you sort by height weight. Boom, and then 5 of the top 10 are in the South because New Mexico's sitting right there in 10th for height, and the weight will probably follow suit very close. Amarillo, Shreveport, El Paso, New Mexico, and then 11th is Odessa. So out of 30,
We got our guys on a diet.
yeah. And then age-wise, once again, this is new to me. I haven't hit that, but there you go. Lone Star, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Shreveport, Amarillo, Odessa. In your 5 of your top 9 teams, the age, is off the charts in the South. So South bigger, South stronger, South older. We knew that this is an old league in the first place, but when you start sorting it that way, I'd be very curious to see who the youngest team in the league is. Chippo, no, it doesn't bother. It doesn't. That falls right into play. Janesville is known for keeping young guys and trying to pull in very young, skilled players.
Bismarck, same thing.
What's
St.
that?
Cloud. Bismarck, St. Cloud,
Yep.
similar.
Yep. So, hope that helps a little bit and answer the question. Besides that, I don't really have much more to say. There's not much more I want to say.
Thank God.
What do you mean by that?
We're all cheering.
Yeah, you're cheering. All right, that's all we got for breaking down. Hopefully, we helped you a little bit understand the AJHL a little bit better. Who goes up there? What kind of play they have? I know we got off a little bit on breaking down the null a little bit, but also I hope it helps you understand how this all works dynamics-wise. The league we just looked at, not big on Americans, but Americans take advantage of that league when they do get up there and play up there, and it's a good place to play. Mike, any final thoughts?
I would just say if you're following along when we get into like USHL draft period, null draft period, I think you'll see some of the top Americans for sure in the AJ, get opportunities. Whether they come over or not, that's, remains to be seen. But you'll see a lot of those top guys get opportunities into those 2 leagues. So if you're following along, you can kind of track it. As you go, and same rules apply to the BC and the MJ and the SJ and all of those other leagues that I'm sure we'll get to in further episodes, but it's just kind of how it happens. The cream rises to the top, and especially if they're kids that aren't committed, they end up coming over to the USHL or the NOL specifically to work their way into that commitment.
Absolutely. All right. I hope this helped everybody. Thanks for coming on board. Remember, Junior Hockey Live Facebook, or excuse me, Junior Hockey Live on our YouTube page. Go like and subscribe there. Junior Hockey Advisor, like and subscribe there too if you can. Those are how we keep this going. We're trying to grow those audiences. It sure would be a big help if you did that. You can always go and have a discussion on this topic on Junior Hockey Advisor discussion page, where we talk about all the things that we share here. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next Monday. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to call in sick, work for myself, work at home, but going to call in sick so I can watch Tiger. See everybody later.
All right. Good job, Jeff. We'll see you.